Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to our Build Your Career webinar series. My name is Michelle Fawn, and I manage our education and professional certification products and services here at the IEEE Computer Society. Each month, we will be hosting webinars on vital business skills that will help you excel throughout your career. Topics covered include communication and presentation skills, interviewing tips, personal branding, effective writing, tips to improve your outside-the-box thinking, and more. Before we get started, I would like to address some housekeeping tasks. The recording of this webinar has started. You can ask any question in the Q&A panel. Our speaker, Elsa, will answer as many questions as you can following her presentation. In a few days, you will receive an email with instructions to access both this presentation slide along with the recording on demand. Today's webinar is on writing conference efficient emails. We get to control the first impression our coworkers and potential customers receive of our written communication. While our attentions must back up whatever we claim, don't make the mistake of downplaying yourself via negative wording. This session explains the logic behind written communication and explains in easy-to-use tactics how to present your ideas on the best light possible. Joining us today is Elsa Velasco-Paul, co-founder and creator of the M&E Group, a marketing and consulting firm based in Tulsa, Oklahoma since 1997. Elsa has served as the international CX manager for the global company, the Crosby Group. She has trained corporations both in person and in webinar formats in many different subjects, such as persuasive communication, design thinking, branding, leadership, and continuous improvement process. Elsa, thank you for presenting today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everybody. Just before we start, let me take you down memory lane. We've all felt it. You finish typing up your email, you hit that send button, and then it hits you. You just left somebody on the to or on the CC that you shouldn't have. The reply all or sending emails to the wrong person is right up there in people's worst fears, along with, number one, losing your cell phone and with talking in public. And if you've ever done that, I know totally your pain because I've done that too. But you know what? You and I, we do not have anything compared to Vince. Let me introduce you to Vince. Back in 2015, August of 2015 to be exact, Vince did the same thing. He hit reply all, except that he hit reply all from his Reuters work email. Yep, he hit reply all to all 33,000 Reuters employees. That message then brought an onslaught of reply all, quote unquote, emails, including people who, yes, they clicked reply all to tell everybody, hey, stop replying all. There's a company spokesperson that came up and it came all over the newspaper saying that some employees even reported that their emails slowed down just because of this onslaught of reply alls. The systems remain working, but eventually it did slow down. Back then, the number of emails, and I'm talking about sent and received, was on the plus side of 205 billion. Yeah, that's with a B. We fast forward 5 years to now, and we are close to 306 billion again. By 2023, we're estimating that the number is going to be close to 347 billion. We're estimating that, again, by 2023, the number of active email users, people like you and me, is going to be around 4.4 billion. So let's make this something that we can use. Let's put this in perspective. The average number of emails that we have in an inbox is close to 200. This means that an email owner is going to spend 11 hours weekly going through work messages. And I'm not talking about our personal messages. In case you're wondering, spam is really a big chunk of that. It's a significant problem. Depending on what source you're going to use, spam can account for at least 30%, and on the high number, approximately 60% of your daily email traffic. And for our workshop today, this number is going to matter because this is noise. These are distractions, and the more distractions, the harder it is for our audience, that is the reader, to quote unquote see our email in the midst of, again, all of this noise. Hi, everyone. My name is Elsa Velasco-Paul, and just as Michelle did the honors of introducing me, I am part of the wonderful M&E group. It is our honor, it is our pleasure to be here again with you, and this session is going to be a really, really fun one and a really busy one. This session is a hands-on experience like probably none that you've ever been before. What we're going to do is we're going to go through a foundational discussion first, and we're going to pair it with studios, and we call studios email examples. We're going to show you what needs improvement, but we're going to have you tell us and show where you think this needs improvement. So to get the best use of this time, I want you to make sure that you have access to pen, paper, or if you like it, you can type, you can use your phone. But make sure that you write down those questions, write down even your thoughts. I want to know your comments. I want to know what you think about these. And more importantly, I want you to look right here. You should have access to the team chat right there. That's where I want to see your comments. That's where I want to see your questions. I don't want you to leave them for the end because by then we've lost the flavor of when you have those questions, okay? So make sure I want to hear them right there when you get them. However, if we don't get to all of your comments and all of your questions, don't worry. We always collect these and we reply after today. Of course, we always connect with you on LinkedIn. I love keeping the conversation going. Thank you so much. Some of you have already connected, and I love the conversations that we're already having. But I don't want to move forward before I say a thank you, a huge thank you to a wonderful group of people that have birthed a wonderful partnership. And it's because this is a brilliant bunch of people. This is a huge thank you to the IEEE Computer Society. As always, thank you so much, Michelle, Scott, Eric, and Carrie, for your invaluable support. You guys make this so easy and so much fun. And also thank you to our support team behind the scenes. Thank you, Mike, on the Q&A support team today. He is the person that is taking care of all your questions. Any questions that you have of something that I have said, send it over. He can take care of it. And if he can't answer, he will make sure that I do. And any other questions, make sure you connect with us through LinkedIn. However, this is almost like 10% about me, 90% about you. Now that you know who we are, I want to know who you are. So in the next poll question, I want to know, where do you position yourself? I mean, career-wise. So are you a student, a manager, a supervisor? Did you just get your career? Yay! Did you just get a job? Do we have any directors in the group? Any retired friends over here? Michelle, could you help us with that poll, please?
Sure, I just clicked it, so we'll give them a minute.
Awesome. So while Michelle is putting it up there, I just want you to click and just let us know. Just click where you are. And the reason why we want to know this is because that is going to help us tailor the conversation according to where you are. And I will focus according to where the majority is to make sure that the email strategies are devoted to this section. So Michelle, let me know when we are closer to having the majority of folks voting, sure, and we'll get going.
Here's the results.
Let's see, who do we have?
Do you see the results, Elsa?
Oh my goodness, this is awesome. Usually we have like a heavily onto one segment, but this is beautiful because we have a very balanced sheet today. So wonderful. You know what I love? Hats off. Thank you to all my retired friends. I love seeing you here. You are just rubbing in that you have all the time in the world and you're having a ton of fun. Hey, I'm so sorry that this year hasn't been that awesome for you, but I promise next year is going to be much better. Yay for my students. This is the right place to be. Don't make the mistakes that we did. Awesome. My PhD candidates, come on, get that coffee going. It's really going to be worth it. And to my directors, thank you. Thank you, because as a director myself, I know we are the worst offenders. So we are the ones that really should be here. all of you guys here. No, and now that we know this, the time to get a bit serious has come, or maybe not. If you have the chance to read this, you're going to get the gist of this slide. This page is just a humorous approach that we have to say, please let us know that if you need to use the material contained in this presentation, just let us know. Most of the time, we are more than glad to partner with you. So please connect with us before utilizing the content for your next presentation. Our core, the essential component of the M&E group is that we want to help you succeed and to do so in the best and most efficient way possible. And I'm throwing this word around a lot. What's with this whole quote unquote efficient emails thing? What does this really mean? Let me show you instead of telling you. If there's somebody on this planet that can talk about efficiency, it's Peter Drucker. He acknowledges efficiency as a focused effort on doing better what is already being done. And we're kicking it off from here because we have to assume that effectiveness is not in question. And that is, we already vetted, we know, we confirm that we're doing the right things, okay? So that's not something that we have to go back to. You're going to be surprised of how many of us send emails more out of habit or, because that's what everybody else does, almost like that's the company culture. Because of this addiction to emails, a written communication pipeline is clogged with, emails that never should have been. In today's section, we're going to unpack the how to, number one, know when you should really be sending emails. Number two, we're going to also, and as a result of, know how to increase our open rate. And ultimately, number three, is how to make the best use of our time in the time of those around us in business environments. Summary, or the bottom line is, we want purposeful emails done right. So the following question is, how do I know when an email fits or not in what I want to do? Well, just answer this question. Depends on how efficient you want your communication to be. And this has a purpose too. An email, first and foremost, is a form of communication. So that means there is a need, or at least there should be. There is a need to relay something to someone. It's as simple as that. We are going to be a need to connect an idea, a concept via, it can be words, symbols, sounds, images, to a specific audience. Depending on how efficient you want this communication to be, you're going to select the best vehicle to do so. So it can be in person, it can be video conferencing or a call, it can be an email, or it can be text or chat, for example, via Teams or via Zoom or via whatever you want to use via your phone. Email is going to be very, very high on the efficiency side if you look at the arrow, but it's not going to be very high on the personalization side. However, something that we're seeing nowadays is that as we become more connected, and especially in 2020 because of the effects of COVID-19, we're seeing an increasing trend to introduce personal touches even in emails. And we have a whole segment that we're going to talk about how to introduce a more personal touch in our emails. Bottom line is the correlation between personalized and efficiencies is also going to explain why text and chat right up here are going to be perfect, for example, to deliver time-sensitive information from and to a group of people. If you want to let your team know that you're going to be out of the office for an hour and a half, but it's not something critical that needs to be documented, probably you want to go into the group chat. You don't need to send an email. Whereas sensitive information, for example, an admonishment or calling to attention something that somebody needs to correct themselves, or a change in job duties is way, way better delivered in person. I would never do that in email, or frankly, I would never do it even doing chat. The more personalized, the less efficient the communication is going to be. So why does this matter again? Well, because some messages do not qualify to be an email. Think of this, lunch plans. Do you want to go out to lunch? Confirming a coworker is bringing the report to a meeting, or relaying something personal in nature. None of those qualify or make it to the email league. I mean, go ahead, send it, do whatever you want, but know that you are contributing to that billion-plus number of emails we talked about in the first slide. Capiche? It's on you, friends. Now that we know this, we want to know, what is this whole category of business email types? Well, we know from the get-go that approximately 63% of professionals like you and me, we still consider email to be the best communication tool for our needs. And it's still going to be there for a little while until we get a disruptive innovation tool that debunks and gets email out of its throne. As long as there is a reason to send an email and the receiver has not instructed us not to do so, we always want to, number one, use email, and then as an alternative communication form, use something else as a redundancy. Business emails are going to be classified according to their formality. So in the first one, we're going to have the first group, which is going to be formality, then by direction, and then by hierarchy. The first one is going to be by formal and informal. Then by their direction, which is going to be internal and external, and then obviously by their hierarchy. Internal emails are the ones that are generated within what is considered an organization. And an organization can be like 5 people in a startup or a 50,000 plus personnel Fortune 500 corporation. The same principles are going to apply. The hierarchical category, that third one that has the upwards, the downwards, and the lateral, that one is going to explore the different communication dynamics that are going to unfold depending on the perceived relationship between the sender and the receiver. We're going to unpack this pretty soon, so keep this pretty close, okay? Now that we have a good idea of this whole macro business types of emails, let's go into the micro. And this is where I want you to know the elements of an email. When we talk about it, we're going to start to discover what I call building your personal checklist. By now, start to type down, where is it that we can make some of those mistakes that makes our emails not do so awesome? There's 2 key components on an email, friends. 2. Number 1, the message, or what we call the what. And the second one is going to be the sender or the receiver, or in this case, the who. And these 2 are going to connect and have a glue or a purpose that is going to be derived from applying the other tactical, the other W's. And that's going to be the who, the what, the where, the when, and ultimately the very last one, which is the how. And the one that is missing here is the why. And that is because the why was the very first one when we said, does this qualify to be an email? Yes or no? Do you remember that? And that's when we did that pyramid to say, do I want to send a chat? Do I want to talk to this person in person? Or do I want to send a call? So the first category, the first element is going to be the message. And the message in an email, ideally, in a perfect world, should always answer one question, not several. And it's going to be, what are we addressing? And should only ask one idea per email. And the reason is because we want to ensure that idea is fully resolved. The quote unquote ask should be something easy, something clear to read, and something clear to understand, or tell me what you want me to do. The second part is the design. The design is going to take care of that. It's what tells me how can I read it easily. So it's the enough amount of white space within the space. It's bullet points. It's the type of font that I use. The content is what is the data that is within the email. Above all, the content has to be true. It has to be comprehensive and has to be sufficient to support or to aid the receiver in resolving the question. The other ones, they are the active agents in this relationship. So some folks say, do you need to have a receiver? Absolutely. I had somebody question, well, what about the Jerry Maguire example when he sent that whole blanket email? He did. It was a whole bunch of people. So in reality, it was an even bigger receiver than anybody thought. Now that we know that, let's go a little bit deeper. Let's go and talk about the message. We mentioned before that the content has to be true, and I can't emphasize this more. We always have to vet. We need to confirm your data. And that is because hearsay is an extremely dangerous source. That follows content. The quality of your content is king. If your information is not only not true, but it's also not relevant to the receiver, you can have the best design in the planet, and it won't get the attention you intended. Let me give you an example. You see those tons of marketing emails that you get flooded with when you go on your email, or even when you go on Facebook, they're trying to sell you something. Look at it. The design is amazing. The copyright is incredible, but you never open it. See my point? From the subject line to the closing, this should carry one topic, and with that, a clear call to action regarding this whole topic or ask. This task, this request, or this information should be always presented clearly and directly right after the pleasantry or the hi, hello, dear, whatever you want to ask. We call this the bottom line has to be on top, and it has to carry all the way. For example, let's say that you're asking more resources for a project. You need 2 more people to be assigned to your team to help you finish a project. The clear asking for resources, how much, when, why, you have to spell it out. Make it easy to your reader to understand what you need and make it quickly. A purposeful design has to happen because business emails have a very specific style. They're professional, but they're also brief. And when we say brief is you should be able to skim an email in 30 seconds and know immediately what you want. There should be plenty of white space to assist the reader. We want to use shorter paragraphs, lists, even bullet points to streamline the information. Use headings if necessary to break up concepts because that helps to skim. In general, we're going to have emails that they ask for information, they're going to ask for responses, but make sure that it is always very, very easy to understand. The second component of emails is going to be the agents or the senders and the receivers. In the senders and the receivers, this is when we're going to talk about the interactions, right? And this is where it gets really, really fascinating, or at least in my opinion, because here is when we're going to talk about what happens between these folks. There's going to be 4 types of business communications. One is going to be the internal upwards, internal downwards, internal lateral, and external. The internal upwards is going to be anything that comes from a subordinate up to a manager, or somebody up the organizational hierarchy. Leaders, they need information to flow upwards to have a true pulse on the operations of the company. This is going to be data-driven, and it's going to answer the need, a specific need. So here we want to avoid the scenic route. That is the additional details that I'm not really asking. We want the question to be answered, and we want this to be able to be skimmed without the additional details. That's why I say, can this be captured within 30 seconds? If you refer to any documents, add them. Don't make me work extra just to finish digesting the information that I've asked for it. The second group is going to be the internal downwards. And as you may have guessed, this is the information that comes from a supervisor or a superior to the subordinates. In an ideal world, again, it should be professional, clear, logical. One of the pet peeves of subordinates of mid and upper management directives is really having to read their bosses' minds and find out, what do you really want? This is my suggestion for us, the folks that are in upper and mid management. If we can't jot down what we want, why we want it, and how we want it, we haven't finished cooking the idea. More times than not, we, upper management, are using email as a sounding board. Not only is that not cool, it's just not a smart use of people's time. There should be no room for interpretation. The language should concisely explain exactly what needs to happen. Now, the internal and lateral, this is the one where things can get a little bit interesting, because this is the one that happens among coworkers or people of the perceived same rank. This may be cross-departmental communications or just internal departmental dealings. This has a more collaborative feel. It's quicker and paced, and there's also going to be an assumption of a certain level of know-how. Both of us in departments, we know something. We understand things at a certain level. So having to spell out acronyms and jargon is not needed. We both know that. There's almost like a cultural feel. It tends to feel less distant and closer, just as long as professionalism is still present. The last one is the external communication. I think some of you that had been with us, with some others, you will know that I am an attorney by training. So this is where I'm going to put my attorney hat again. This is any communication that leaves the office. It's going to deal with customers, prospects, vendors, newspapers, partners, regulatory agency, anything that is crossing that door and going outside. This also means sales presentations. And here we want to excite and generate interest, but it has to be factually based. So number one, we want to respect people's time because we want to get to the point and state what do we want. But we want to be careful. If we're unsure regarding it being safe to share this information or not, I want you to make sure you check with your marketing team first. Sharing the wrong kind of information can get you in hot water. And I'm talking antitrust, Sarbanes-Oxley hot water. This is very important. Be very, very careful, my friends. Now that I've scared you to wits, let's lighten it up. And let's talk now. Okay, bottom it up. When do I send emails? Well, we want to be aware of one thing first. The second biggest stumbling block in email writing is over-communicating. And this happens because we're so used to emailing that it's almost used as an extension of verbal communication when it's really not. Email is still written communication, so it follows those rules, and they're very, very different. We react differently to written text than when we have somebody's face or a person's voice, for example. Email is perfect when you have a ton of data, complex data that needs to be delivered to a group of people, and when there's enough comfortable amount of time. That's what we mean by pertinent time. Pertinent time is days, not hours. And an email, by definition, should be outlined to resolve an issue and designed to spike interest to an audience enough so that they can read it. We can be emailing the wrong person or emailing somebody that is hard to reach because they don't use email or because their hours just don't allow them to use email in enough time. So that's not going to work. That's when you use other forms of email. Perhaps where email is beautiful and totally reigns is because it has an ability to store and access information. And that's where some people fail. You tend to send somebody through chat or through text, hoping that that file will stay there. That's very dangerous. I would always send it through email for no other reason that you can store it there. However, again, if you remember what we said in the beginning, we're also seeing some built-in chat platforms incorporating sharing capabilities. So again, I think we're on the verge of seeing some disruptive innovation moments. And to me, I think that's super, super exciting. All right. I'm seeing some chat movement here. And people are saying, but I've been in several of your workshops. You always give me the tactical, the meat, the slides with the how-to that I can take the picture on my phone, and I'm not seeing it here. Are you going to share that? Of course I am, my friend, and I'm so glad you asked. There it is. Boom. This is the slide that tells you when should you send an email or when should you call. If anybody, and I'm going to date myself here, if anybody remembers that that song by The Clash, Should I Stay or Should I Call? This is it. When should we? Depends on how much time you have to wait for an answer. If you have less than 30 minutes, do not email. Call. Even better, go and see them. If you have less than 2 hours, text. If you have a whole business day to get the information, then send them a message via chat. And texting in chat works as long as you know the person you are communicating with habitually uses either that text or that chat platform. Only when you know that your deadline allows you to wait more than 2 days for a reply is when I would type away my very concise single-purpose email with a deadline to my receiver. Does that make sense? Now, what does a perfect email look like? It starts like a newspaper. Email subject lines, I love to refer to them like newspaper headlines. They should convey the main point of your message or the idea that you want the reader to take away and catch your eye. Therefore, number one, be as specific as possible. Hi or FYI, no. That is not going to cut it. If your message is time sensitive, you know what you want to do? Say something like, meeting Thursday, December 2. That's perfect. Think about the subject lines on the email messages you receive. Remember those that you acted immediately? Yep, it's because they're specific and they tell you what do they want. The second one, the greetings and the sign-offs, because they're connected, you want to use something. So please don't just start immediately with your text and leave it as it is, no matter how much you know the people. If you know the person well, you want to be a little bit on the formal side, but not too much. So I'm not a huge fan of, I hope this finds you well. In my position, I think it sounds a little bit Victorian, and I think there's other ways that we can convey that we wish people well. How do we make this enticing? Well, you can tell them what it is and how this is going to relate to the person that you're talking about. The body of the email, you want to start immediately by telling them what is the purpose that you're asking for. The first line should go straight to the point, and be sure to provide the reader immediately after the line with some context. So for example, if I'm replying about an email, tell them I'm replying about this email and so and so and so. Sometimes you can even include that same email or restate the sender's email. The one caveat, please do not leave the 16 pages of email string that came before. And be very careful with including emails or email communications before that you do not have permission to add. I love using paragraphs to separate steps because, it makes it easier to read. And finally, state at the end, what do you want to happen? If you're requesting a response, say it. If you're requesting something that has a due date, say it. Ending your email with the next step can be so useful because it tells me what do you want, when do you want it, and what does it mean if it doesn't happen. The closing is extremely important because it engages the customer again in saying, I need this by this date, and if you have any questions, you can reach me at 567-4301. Another great closing for those of us that habitually talk with folks that don't reply, I love this one. If I don't hear from you by end of business Wednesday, I'll take this reply as a green light from your team to go ahead. You know what's going to happen? You're going to get a reply very quick. This works very good with lateral and cross-departmental projects. I would be a little bit more careful if you're going upwards. I wouldn't do it. Now that we understand this one, I have a great tip for you when we're talking with your boss. If you have a boss that is extremely busy and you just want to keep them in the loop, no action needed is wonderful. It lets your boss know that this is just for your reading at your leisure, but it's important for you to stay in the loop. Now let's talk about the things we want to avoid. That is fatal flaws. Just as signatures are often part of the marketing strategy taglines, and fonts are restricted as well because they protect that professional look and feel, quotes that have absolutely nothing to do with the business you are in, fonts in different colors. I've seen GIFs, I've seen links to other sites that have nothing to do with the operation, even too many personal emails or jokes. All of these are going to be in this whole category of unprofessional taglines or unprofessional quotes or unprofessional fonts. Unnecessary emails is very dangerous because this is stripping away your credibility. At the time when you probably will need an urgent assistant, you become the boy that cried wolf. Typos, words in caps, incorrect names or incorrect names of the project, for example, are often a result of either haste, disinterest, or immaturity. I add in here too annoying punctuation. These blunders, they make you look, well, unprepared, disinterested, or sloppy. And those three things, friends, that's really, really tough to recover from. So always proofread before you send. A too casual tone or something too formal or being over the top, it just makes you look, let's say it, overdressed. It makes you look stuffy and most of the time silly. So that also includes unnecessary confidentiality notices. Just avoid it. Being too casual can make you look unprepared at times. And again, that just undermines the professional look and feel that you have in your organization. Snippy, curt, rude interactions spells that you can't work well with others. So don't do that. Now, some people are going to tell you, don't ever send an email in anger. I'm going to tell you, go ahead, send it. But when you do send it, I want you to send it all in caps, in red, and say exactly what you want to say and as long as you want to. Just one thing, write it in your personal email and send it to yourself. I believe there's something so therapeutic about letting go of those feelings when we're so upset, because it also serves to give us perspective a couple of hours later when we read that same email and we've cooled down. And believe it or not, it's going to temper our language incredibly afterwards when everything has passed by. Incomprehensible messages is a key form of making communication happen. And it happens because it's either unclear or disorganized or too long or complex. And this can happen because there's jargon or canyons or because people should know what I'm talking about. Don't do that. Making concepts hard to understand only shows that we're dealing with insecurities, and it's silly. It's really, really silly. And unnecessary reply alls or CCing everybody or CCing without approval is sloppy or it's fear-based. And it's also disrespectful of people's time. You risk becoming noise in people's minds. So next time your email comes through, it's not going to be front and center. Some two others that I wanted to add here is leaving the gibberish in the subject line when you forward something and starting a sentence in the subject line and continuing in the body. Please do not do that. Now, what are the best practices that we do want to do? Yes. Be purposeful. The most hated phrase in emails, you guessed it. Per my last email. And it is because it conveys a ton of emotions and none of them are positive has to work on the positive side because it doesn't have any other form of communication like tone of voice or gestures. So every voice, every word is going to count. We want to start with why to ensure that it qualifies and it's not a phone call or it's not a meeting. We want to be brief and polite in recognition of people's times. And we want to make sure that we acknowledge emails for no other reason that we want our emails to be recognized. If you're sending more than 3 emails going back and forth and the request or the issue is still not understood, please make sure that you go and talk to that person. We call that rule the rule of the 3 strikes. Including the batteries is just simply include the information that you're talking about. So if you're referring to a project and some reports were in there, just make it easier for the person that is helping you to be able to have all the information at hand. Get comfortable with changing our sorry language for a more empowering language. So instead of saying, sorry for missing that information, say, thanks for flagging that, or hey, thanks for catching that. And always, always, always proofread before you send. Proofread before you send. I love to use the @ symbol in the body of emails as a way to assign, as a way for my emails to stand out in the inbox when people are going through their emails. That way people know that there is a specific task assigned to them and that it is important enough for them to look at it. Think of it. If this email, the one that you just sent, was put on the newspapers tomorrow, would you be okay with it? Now that we have all of this in practice, let's see how you would apply what we just discussed today. Let's start with our studios. Let's see studio number 1. Pen and paper ready? Here we go. All right, this is our first email, and this is an internal downwards. And this internal downwards is going to be an example, and it is from Mr. Michael Corporate Speak, and he is talking to his product manager, Tricia Does It All. They've been working together for 8+ years, and he needs Tricia's support big time. Here we want to look for our 5 W's, remember? So in this email, I want you to start jotting down, do you see the why, what, where, who, how? I also want you to see, how about the fatal flaws? Do you see jargon? Do you see any MBA speak unnecessary? Do you see anything there that does not fit? And I'm going to give you guys 20 seconds to just skim through it. That way we can move to the next slide, and then you can see what does an edited version look like. All right, now let's go and see what the edited version looks like. Oh my goodness, this looks like a slaughterhouse. Well, the first one is, this is terrible. Look at this. His tone is absolutely off the mark. Although he's been working with her for years, he completely missed her name, and proofreading would have caught that. His subject line is so vague that it puts the onus on Tricia to figuring out which project he's talking about. The hemorrhage of jargon is just sad. It's just sad, period. Pair it with this generous dose of acronyms that he peppered this whole email, and this is an email that is just ridiculous to read. The rule of thumb here of the 30 seconds is nowhere close. We're at a couple of minutes, and we have more questions than what we started. So let's clean this up, and let's figure out what this should look like. Okay, this makes much more sense. Well, first of all, Michael gets her name right. Then he moves on to add the name of the project. Good job. He states when he needs it by. Perfect. He adds his extension number. Great. He says why he needs it. He needs it for the 12-month marketing strategy. And he even gives Tricia a bigger view of what her role and what her report plays in this big picture. Trisha now not only knows what to do, but she feels empowered to be part of a project. She owns this. And you know what? You bet that the result is going to show it. And that's what I mean by working extra, we have to work extra to soften the tone. The other side of the coin that we can see is sometimes when we have to write other types of emails. We want to be very, very purposeful in the types of emails that we write with our lateral friends and when we talk to folks that work for us. Now that we come close to the end, let's talk about what are those important components, or what is our checklist looking like. Number one, emails are more a guided conversation than a hasty reply. And that is why tone and format is so important. If we're having a conversation with your boss and you start saying choppy sentences all over the place with little connection in between them, you know what he or she is going to think? They're going to think you're crazy. And emails are read the same way. Write an email as you would read it if this was read out loud. Never read or send an email that you are not certain it is purposeful and it is true. And if that is why, if it can't be answered, don't do it. People are going to appreciate it. Readability and interest and context makes sense because we want this email to be interesting. And interesting for the reader, not to you. Can they spot that easily? Can they read it within the first sentence? Does the subject line relay that? Does the first and the last sentence sum that? Did we add the attachments that they need? Did we spell out the jargon? And important, can they reach me back easy? To sum this up, I love to use THINK. This is an acronym that I use before I send a message. And that is just very simple. Before I send a message of any type, I think, is what I'm sending true, helpful, important, necessary, and kind? And if it's not, then don't send it. If you send a lot of information the same way with the same components, almost like a template, hey, check out on Outlook, Quick Parts. It's going to save you so much time. And if you're more challenged on the grammar side and proofreading is not your forte, check out Grammarly, and you are most welcome. I think I speak for most of us when I say that we certainly did not expect 2020 to be what it turned out to be, right? Depending on where you're listening from today in this part of the world, I think we're on the plus side, maybe of 9-10 months of isolation. And that is really, really tough because by definition, by design, we are social entities. We thrive, we live because we interact. And all of a sudden, we've been in a position where what we do instinctively, where we thrive, is considered dangerous. We now have been forced to using email and vehicles that were considered almost sterile into an extension of our social interactions. Today, we went from understanding and taking a deeper understanding of email and knowing that email is more than words. Email is about getting to an underlying dynamics that can make or break relationships. Because in the end, that's what it's all about. It's about people trying to connect. The last thing we want and we need right now is to flood the world with bad emails. We don't need that. This is the time when we need and we have almost an obligation to become ambassadors of goodwill, to do something to make all of this better. And purposefully crafting our communication to make sense, to serve, and to do something is starting by here. If you just use the THINK acronym in mind, I promise you, you're going to watch and see around you how everything becomes much, much better. As usual, here from the M&E Group, we are eternally grateful for your attention and your kindness. You can always reach us via LinkedIn, via our address, and on the chat box. I think an hour ago, we stepped in as strangers, but I kind of have the sense that we're leaving here as a kind of a cool group that totally knows that emails really connect people. From our heart to yours. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Elsa. There's one question here that hasn't been answered yet. Any guides on email attachments?
Yes. And that would depend on how technical. Again, because number one, do you have permissions to use the guides? And again, the attorney hat came back on, right? You always want to make sure that you own and you have permissions to use the guides. And I would only use the attachments that are relevant and that make sense. So for example, if you are referring to a project and the project has been going on for a while, I wouldn't add the T's and C's, the terms and conditions from the very beginning. That's ridiculous. I would only add the information relevant to the question that I'm asking right now. Does that make sense? Anything before that is just, I mean, why am I doing that? You should be able to have that information before. It's only the information that is pertinent to the question that I'm asking right now. And again, you should only have one question in that email. So files should only be smaller. If you have to add a lot of more information, that is a meeting. You are having a meeting. You're not having an email. Good question, by the way.
Great. There's another question. What was the other app in addition to, I think it says Grammarly?
Yes, absolutely. Grammarly is fantastic. So is that the question? What is Grammarly?
Yes.
Okay.
What is another app in addition to Grammarly?
Oh, wonderful. Yes. So I have QuickParts. I have Grammarly. I actually can put on a list of, I call it like my cheat apps and links and places to go. Some of them are extensions that you can just have on your computer, and they do the work for you. So all that Grammarly does, it's an extension. You start typing, and it just highlights everything that could be written differently. So it's not only just correcting your grammatical errors, it corrects the flow of your conversation. So that's why I'm really fond of it. But please connect with us on LinkedIn so I can understand exactly what you're looking for, and I can tell you what it is. I'm talking about hundreds of different options. So if you connect with us, I can direct you in the right direction. But yeah, I think somebody asked for slide 18. Is that right? Okay, perfect. So this is slide 18, and this is a check. Just because I have another one that we have options for this one, but basically this is an example of our W's. We just want to make sure that all of these can be found here. Great question. I like that one.
Okay, here's another one. Can you share advice on emails where someone throws you under the bus? Should you talk on the phone first, clarify, and then respond and address the incorrect information?
Yes.
Or other strategies?
Well, number one, don't slash their tires. That doesn't work. I mean, it does work, but it's not good. Number two, yes, I would absolutely go and talk to the person. And here's why. People hate conflict, which is another reason why everybody sends emails, because we love to hide behind our keyboard. But if you want that to stop, especially if you want it to stop across the board, immediately when that happens, go and talk to the person face-to-face, or as much as you can, face-to-face or video conferencing, whatever. And ask them very politely, avoid the "you said this." Just say, in the last conferencing, when this was said, so and so and so and so, I think this was misspoken because these are the facts inside. That person is going to recant immediately, if that's the case, or maybe that person is going to say, this is how I understood this happened. But two things are going to happen. Number one, you're going to feel incredibly empowered, and you're going to learn that conflict goes away once you go and hit it immediately. Number two, that person is never going to do it again, ever. Number three, it's going to go around that you're the kind of person that if they do that, you come and call them out. So it's not going to happen. So obviously, always go to the immediately. Go and talk with them as soon as you can. Don't send an email, ever. Go and talk to them. Great question, by the way. Great question.
Great. Here's another one. Academic emails most of the time can't be skimmed through in 30 seconds. So what is your opinion?
I come from a family of academics. And I can tell you that depends on the area. And I can tell you that it is a whole different category. Let's be honest, I'm an attorney. If you ever seen an email attorney, you can know that that's not the case. But remember that this is specifically made for business emails, right? Academic emails are a whole different group. Writing emails, for journalism are a whole different group. Anything in that whole realm follows a different set of rules. Personal emails are going to be a different set of rules. So absolutely, that is a rule. But do I have a feeling that we overdo it? Yes, I do. I do believe so. I think we do have a little bit of an ego trip, and I can say it with all certainty because I'm part of those two groups. I don't think that there's a bigger ego in this planet than academics and then an attorney, and I'm part of both. But proud to be part of both. But remember, this whole presentation was about business emails, which is completely different. Great question and great observation.
Great. Here's another question. Any thoughts on the use of the asterisk as an emphasis?
Yes. This goes to if you're using it between friends, between a colleague that you're very familiar with, go ahead, knock yourself out. I am just not fond of being too informal when I'm talking with folks that I want to be seen as a professional. I just don't. I always tend to think that an email is a rigid document that can be interpreted, and it will be interpreted downwards. Very unlikely it will go up in my favor. So I don't leave any room for people to interpret it. If I want to be seen as a professional, as somebody that can be promoted, I always try my email to take me higher. If it was me, I wouldn't do that.
Great. I think all the questions seems to be answered.
Let's see. Well, and again, any other questions, folks, you have my information. You can just reach us over on LinkedIn. I know several of you have reached out, and I love your questions. And even better, I love your cases. If you have your specific cases, I love the academic one. I love the under the bus. I love all those cases because that's where we get to have a lot of fun in seeing, okay, this is what we would have done. Send all of those because that's where the conversation gets much more fun. Hopefully, I know that Eric and Scott, in the beginning of the year, this conversation should have been a workshop at one of the meetings, at one of the conferences. So hopefully we'll get to see you guys at some point in one of the many conferences. But meanwhile, let's connect through LinkedIn and see each other. I adore being with you folks. You have a big, big space in my heart. And I want everybody to have a wonderful and very, very safe rest of the day.
Great. Thank you, Elsa, for this informative presentation. I would also like to thank everyone for attending. I wanted to mention that our next Distinguished Lecture webinar series will be held on the 31st of October at 6 a.m. Eastern Time on past, present, and future of computing, presented by Professor V. Rajaman, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. Our next Build Your Career webinar will be held on November 11th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Stand Out from the Crowd, resumes that will get noticed by employers and interviewing skills to get you hired, by Susan K. Kathy Land, U.S. Department of Defense Missile Defense Agency. Registration for these upcoming events are now open. We will be sending you the links to these future events along with the slides and recordings of this webinar. Thank you again, everyone, and have a safe and wonderful day.